Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Heroes Reforged podcast. We're doing something very special today. You guys have heard us talk about 3D forever and ever.
Literally since the entire time we've been on the internet.
Yeah. We're the only three people who still collect 3D Blu-rays. We go to the movies all the time to watch 3D stuff. So we had a really great opportunity come up where we could talk to some folks who work in 3D and work in stereo conversion, all kinds of stuff. So we're here today with Jeremy Carroll and Jason Bomstein. You guys are stereographers at SDFX Studios. The sort of objective of today is to talk to the audience, maybe give them a little bit of an education on what 3D is, not just conversion, but talk about 3D as a whole when it comes to shooting and conversion and the experience of watching 3D, how people can watch 3D. Because I know today there's a lot of different ways to watch and different types of 3D. But I think more importantly, we want to focus on, why should people care and love 3D?
Yeah.
And
Adam, you also have to mention, we know these guys.
We do.
We worked with
We
these guys.
worked with them. We worked with them here in Burbank.
When Adam and Augustine and myself worked in 3D movies and we were working in post-production, Jason and Jeremy were some of the guys that we worked with. And just some of the many faceless artists who work on this stuff that you guys might not ever get a chance to hear from. So this is very cool that we can, it's a reunion for us.
Yes.
But it's an opportunity to push 3D propaganda. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Happy to participate.
We have an agenda. It's clear what it is, and we are here to enact that agenda.
Good.
Okay, great.
In our conversation, we jumped into it, but we didn't really explain the process of converting something 3D.
Yeah.
So whatever you guys can tell us.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 3 to 4 stage process of all these steps. It first starts with rotoscoping, which is going in and tracing everything in the scene, tracing the characters, tracing the backgrounds, making sure we can separate every leaf, everything.
Details within the object.
Exactly, yeah.
You're giving me trauma pointing to leaves, by the way. That was my... Jurassic Park had a lot of leaves.
A lot of rain, droplets, leaves.
Yeah. Also, Predator Badlands forest. So
oh my gosh.
It'll be great, but the forest gets you. So the first stage is we want to isolate everything and then hand it over to our depth teams. And they go in and basically we recreate the entire film in this gradient black and white version of it. And so that lets us place in 3D how much separation some stuff has between itself, how much it comes onto the screen or goes back into it.
Helps set up relationships within the shot.
Fully customizable process.
It's fully customizable.
Yeah.
It's very akin to working in clay and something, and pulling something out, pulling a face out so you can feel the roundness on the face and make sure ears rotate properly and stuff like that. So we get through all these processes. And then for our cleanup stage, what we do, because when you do that, it's you're kind of, I also think of it when you're making a collage or you cut out some pictures and you want to lift the picture off of the background, then you have that kind of negative space around it. So then we go clean up and we fill all that in, and that's our paint department.
Yeah.
And stuff like
cleaning up kind of the pixel artifacts and the stretching that can happen when you kind of pull those things out of the 2D plate.
Yeah. There's no data there, so you got to put something there.
Exactly.
Otherwise you have stretchy pixels and you're like,
You're replacing that data with what was there, what should be there. Yeah.
It is wild to tell folks too, when you go see a 3D movie and something is has depth out in front of a background, you can literally close one eye and you'll see some stuff behind the character that if you close the other eye, you're not going to see that because the character's covering it, and you'll see stuff on the other side of the character. And you guys
that's just how 3D works. Like an eye works, right? Just hold your finger in front of you and just kind of go back and forth, and you can see a little bit of this knuckle in one eye and a little bit less in that eye.
So much work goes into this stuff. So much work. The painting. Oh my gosh.
So I mentioned you guys are stereographers. For people who have no clue what that is, can you guys explain what a stereographer's role is?
So basically what we do is we work with filmmakers and we work with our teams internally to kind of craft the 3D style of the movie. And we want to figure out how we want it to look, how we want it to feel, and we make sure it's on board with everybody. And then from that, when we go to our internal teams, we're, looking at every shot, we're making sure it's passing tests. making sure we're working with studios and filmmakers to get the look across that they want.
Yeah, we're the main kind of points of contact for filmmakers in the studio execs. So we're the ones that are kind of sitting with them to kind of plan out the 3D of the film, plan out the creative look, and then, you know, like Jason said, just executing that internally with the teams.
I have to imagine too that like with the work that you guys do, the types of movies that are usually 3D movies, they're usually not indie dramas. They're more of the big budget, like blockbusters, we could say.
Yeah.
Do you guys work with, I imagine, a lot of directors that are coming in, and they might be first-time 3D directors. They've never directed a film that is going to be a 3D movie. So you're literally the experts that have been like, we've been doing this for many years. We can kind of walk you through the process. Here's the normal approach. Like, what is it like to work with directors that might have more experience in 3D versus the ones that are like, hey, I've never made one of my movies in 3D. You know, do you do a lot of like hand holding, or is there a lot of like, oh, this is really cool, I didn't know about this, and yeah, this sounds great? Like, what is that versus, you know, working with one type of director versus the other? What's that experience like?
I think, you know, when you work with directors who have worked in 3D before, they're familiar with kind of the language, and they have an idea of what they like and what they don't like. But, you know, for us, we're coming into those sessions, those prep sessions, wanting to have that conversation with them, you know, and if they have that 3D experience, you can talk about what their experience was. And usually I will try to like look at some of the other films they've worked on to get an idea of, okay, what was the look of those films? But then it's very much just a conversation because every film is different, right? So even if they did one thing on one film, that doesn't necessarily mean that they want that on this film. So you kind of sit with them and just go, okay, here's your film. You know, let's talk about your film and what you want to do with your film. And, you know, I will have already watched the film, so I kind of understand what the ebb and the flow of the film is.
Sure.
So we'll just have a conversation about what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes you'll bring along some look dev shots. You might bring along 10 or 12 shots to kind of say,
get like a minute to 10 minutes even to show someone for the first time.
Yeah.
Here's what we did. And it helps introduce them to the process. And it even shows them how much we can change. So you're like, this is what we did. And if they go, you know what? I kind of like it if it looked more like you're looking in a window. We're like, cool, we can have that ready for you.
Click. We got that. It's right there.
Exactly. I wish it was that fast.
We were talking about like hand holding. You know, it's sometimes when you're working with directors who don't know 3D, it's really good to just sit them down and just kind of talk about their film, because you want to make them kind of feel comfortable that their film and what you're doing is in the hands of people who care about their film as much as they do, that you're not trying to say, this is a 3D viewer film and this is how it's going to look. It's very much a collaborative process for them. So us sitting with them and just bringing those look dev shots to just get the conversation started, you know, maybe even before you do kind of a sit down and a spotting session of the film, you bring some shots, you're like, hey, here's some things we thought about. Let's just talk about it and let's put the imagery to the things that we're talking about. What do you like and what don't you like? And then, okay, let's talk about the film as a whole and wrap it in.
I mean, you guys are mentioning like doing sort of tests on these particular shots. I remember back in the day when I was working with you guys and even working at the company down in San Diego, where before even I came up to LA and started working at SDFX, as it's now known as SDFX. I remember doing like that. I would test new potential hires on a test shot of a one frame of the first Iron Man movie. To put that into depth, which I still am like, y'all should go back and put that into 3D. That's a great movie. That would be so cool. And I remember the countless, I can't mention any of them probably because I signed an NDA at some point. We probably signed some of the stuff, but like doing tests on movies that ultimately through various means never ended up being in 3D, but just to see a test of something, I was like, oh man, this would be so cool. This would be so cool. And then it didn't happen. You're like, dang it.
But why? Look at the test. There's potential here. Yeah.
Well, I think that's also, you know, like you were saying, a lot of the movies that get turned into 3D, they are parts of these big franchises and big universe and stuff. So I think there's also, in some ways, we all like grew up being fans of these things. So you get that much more excited. I totally can see how this can look in 3D in a way that maybe even capturing it on camera would not even necessarily work.
I know for a fact you movie nerds have gotten to work on stuff that is like my thing. Again, when I worked with you guys like 10 years ago, I got to touch the original Jurassic Park. When that was turned into a 3D experience and then re-released in theaters for the 20th anniversary, I think it was 2013. And that's still like a career and professional highlight that I get to tell people, like I worked on the original It was awesome.
That's
So,
such an influential film for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that's one of the really neat things about what we do. We get to go back on some of these films and work on these films. You know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to work on Jurassic Park and Titanic and Jaws and Terminator 2. And these are like
the Jaws
these are the
3D.
films.
The 3D in Jaws. I have told you the 3D in Jaws is so
Yeah.
good. And when it was first released for, what was it, the 45th anniversary?
So yeah.
Five something years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, this is incredible. Please, for the love of God, Universal, put this on 3D Blu-ray. I've harangued people at Universal. I've met people who work at Universal in like the home media department at like a random party or something. And I'm like, oh, you don't say. Hey, I have something for you.
Yeah.
And then it was re-released this past year for the 50th.
Yeah, we went.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
such an awesome experience.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
great.
It really was. And that's like the cool thing, you know, what we do is really cool, but to be able to be in kind of this niche part of the industry where you get to go back to those childhood favorites and like touch them and work on them and really like get into, you know, the Raptors in the kitchen in Jurassic Park. And you're like, that's, come on.
Yeah.
That's so cool to be able to relive that childhood stuff. And, you know, there's that 12-year-old version of yourself that's like, you're so cool.
Yeah.
It's so awesome that you're doing this right now. Yeah.
So I feel like one of our biggest frustrations sometimes with audiences when we talk about 3D is like, especially, I mean, nowadays it doesn't particularly matter if it's shot or converted. I feel like the conversation is kind of the same, but I know for conversion specifically, a lot of people talk about, well, I don't like 3D conversion because of this movie. And I'm like, yeah, but this movie came out 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's one of maybe like four.
Adam,
that
you're
I
talking
didn't
about The
really
Last
like.
Airbender. We
I
could just
mean,
say.
I don't know. Let's point our fingers.
Before we all that.
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
and to Adam's point, I also feel like, because I do want to ask you guys this, just as you know, as you guys in your everyday day to day, I do feel like Adam and I and Augustine, with our show on the internet, with our presence online, we are sometimes on the defensive of 3D. Like we tend to defend it and we go to bat for it. And even when we just casually were like, oh, did you see any movies? Yeah, I went and saw this movie over the weekend. I saw it in 3D. It was great. There will always be a comment that's like, 3D is terrible. 3D sucks. And I'm just like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's really great. But I have an experience where like I have a 3D TV at home.
Mm-hmm.
I own the Jurassic Park 3D Blu-ray that we talk about. I own Titanic. I own all these great films that have been put out in 3D with various ways that it was put out in 3D. And I do like to show people that come over to the house, either select scenes or like I've had full movie nights of just a full Jurassic Park. I have, no pun intended, converted even cynical people who you know might not be aware fully, or they're kind of, you know, they started out not as fans, and I take pride in that I'm like, let me just show you the raptors in the kitchen. Let me just show you the third act of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which rips in 3D. It is like Star Wars. It's so good. And in my experience, I found that when I just show people that, it's 9 out of 10 times they're like, this is actually awesome. Is that the experience for you guys, that like when 3D comes up, when your work comes up, do people tend to be kind of like a little standoffish about it, and then you go, well, let me talk to you about it? Like, is that your
more misunderstood than anything?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like meeting new friends and anything. And like sometimes it's even as far as like, oh, I do 3D, like, oh, like animated stuff. Like, no, you go and you put on the glasses. Like,
right. Because people have always said, like, when Toy Story first came out, they're like, the first 3D animated film. And I'm like, well, that's CG. That's a different, like, and people think of computer generated animated movies as like, that's a 3D animated film. And I'm like, kinda. No, there's not a second camera in there, but nowadays there, exactly.
It took my family years to be like, oh, it's not that. It's not that. It's doing You're working with audio? That's what stereo is?
Yeah, the stereo a lot as well too.
Yeah.
You work at Circuit City? No, I do stereo. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's great though, and it really shows like what we do in our process to be able to help, I'm going to use your pun, convert people.
Sure.
Because there's a craft to it, because like there's ways that we can change things subtly. We can work with the film. Like we always want to match the 2D and you match the style, but there's certain points in these big blockbusters, you emphasize that you get that Star Destroyer to come out to you and stuff.
The thing that we always cite is when Doctor Strange pulls one of the Infinity Gems out of the sky.
Yeah.
Because in 2D, it just appears in his hand, but in 3D, it literally comes to his hand.
There's a little...
To be honest, like, did that shot. It was me, and I don't know if you remember Fetz. Fanasa.
Yeah.
He and I were working on that shot, and to be honest with you, he did that. And he had it animate up, and I was like,
Excuse me?
That's
Yeah.
so
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
I was
The
like,
sky
that's so
in your
cool.
hand.
And then I was
Yeah.
like, I love it. I was like, let's do a backup version where it doesn't happen.
Uh-huh.
But we made sure we sent that to the client, and the same thing. They got the call back, and like they saw the notes, and they were like, "It looks so much better. It works so much better. You see it just."
Yep.
Oh, loved it. It's
That's
like kind of like you hit it
great
as a
moment.
star or something.
Doctor Strange has some rad 3D moments.
yeah.
If I
Oh,
Doctor
yeah,
Strange
just
is
in
a-
general.
His
Don't get us
movies,
started.
you know.
I also always pull up the example when I do talk to regular folks and I say, like, look, to go see a movie in 2D and have it work, it's amazing.
Mhm.
And, I like to, sometimes I discuss 3D as this additive thing because, again, maybe we have to defend it a little bit, like
Sure.
it's similar to sound or color in that it's a part of the movie and it is a part of the storytelling. But there's also great films that, like, you can watch Indiana Jones in black and white. You can watch Indiana Jones in black and white and silent, and it still kind of rules because it's just a great movie and great storytelling. And I think that a lot of 3D movies, of course, you can see a complete version of that film in 2D, but the 3D additive stuff. I mentioned that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness has like moments in 3D that you will not experience in 2D.
No.
For example, when I forget what, like, I think it's Wanda walking through one of the Wandas, because there's multiple Wandas, walking through a house. It might have been Steven, but there's a picture of Wanda with her kids framed on a countertop, on a kitchen countertop. And in the movie, she, like a classic Sam Raimi horror film, like turns her head in the picture, and it's very creepy. In 3D, she really sort of, like her head really kind of comes out for a moment. And I'm like, that's something you do not get if you watch the film in 2D. Not to mention the first Doctor Strange with all of the kaleidoscopic,
going through the mouth kind of moment.
Yeah.
It's
all of that
great
stuff,
moment.
all
It's
of that
super
stuff.
immersive.
But yeah, we pull up those moments all the time. But if I can brag about my own work here for a second, one of my proudest moments when I worked in 3D film is I had that shot in the first Avengers movie where Steve Rogers is at the bag. He's at the punching bag, and we come up on him from his back.
That's in the trailer. Yeah.
And I made his muscles in his back huge.
Yes.
I beefed up his body so massively.
Yep.
And I remember the notes I got back from the client, they were like, "This is awesome. He looks massive." And I was like, yes. Like, I was so proud of my work.
Because you can
You
really
know.
push scale, in 3D.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, even with Marvel films, everything's got to be bigger. All the characters have to feel really big, and the 3D is bigger. And there are things you can do in 3D, to your point before, that you can't do in 2D. And,
Right.
And good 3D is really kind of 3D that rides along with the film, right? Like it ebbs and flows like a musical score of the film. And if it's done really, really well, you should just kind of settle into the 3D when you watch it.
Yeah.
Forget you're watching 3D. And that doesn't mean that the cool shots aren't cool and that you can't do cool stuff. But it just means that the 3D isn't calling attention to itself. It's not a character in the film, right? And that's what we always try to do creatively. We're not working with filmmakers to say, hey, this is what our thoughts of the 3D are for your film, and we want to make our 3D like the centerpiece. No, it should really like be an accompaniment to the story. It's about following the story and then crafting your 3D to help to support that story. And there are times where the 3D can actually enhance a shot, like that Doctor Strange shot you were talking about on Jaws. If you look at any shot of the shark underneath the water and you watch it closely, the shark is actually beneath the water plane, and all the ripples and all the glints of the water are at the top of the surface. You get a sense of depth and scale in Jaws in 3D that you don't necessarily have in 2D. So we get those moments where the 3D actually helps kind of push the story in a really, really fun way.
Yeah. And it's like, again, it's tricky because I've also talked to folks that have been like, well, I'll go see a 3D movie, but then at some point I just kind of forget that it's in 3D. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. That's the point.
That's
you're
the
still
point.
feeling it, but you might not know that you're feeling it.
Yep.
You know, it's like you mentioned, it's like a musical score. Like great musical scores are not so distracting that you're like, oh, this sounds awesome. I can't wait to listen to it by itself when I get home.
Because not every moment is a 3D moment, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's an equally
So
as
it's just
important
learning in the world.
to tone it
Yeah.
down and know when to tone it down.
Exactly.
So it's
yes.
like when you amp it up, it's even more.
And if you're
effective.
following story and you're following the camera movement, the camera framing, the lensing, and then even the score, you'll notice like in a film, when those action scenes amp up, your camera becomes more dynamic. A lot of times the camera will start to move through scenes a bit differently. That musical score will amp up and your stereo has to kind of match to that. And if it does and you do it really well, it won't call attention to itself because it is doing exactly what the story is telling it to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
One of the things that we talk about and all the time is like the style of 3D.
Yes.
You know, and I know working on so many different projects, each movie had kind of, I wouldn't say they all fell into a certain bucket, but you definitely got the sense of like, okay, these types of movies tend to have more of this particular type of style. Like for Marvel, for example, a lot of it was like party in the front.
Yeah.
You know, I know James Cameron, when he talks about 3D, he likes to talk about it being a little bit more linear.
Yeah.
How much of that do you guys consider when?
Also, do you want to explain party in the front for people?
Oh, yes.
You guys want to explain?
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody knows what party in the back is. That's a
It
bullet.
is.
But what is party in
I've
the
had
front?
a couple unfortunate ones
Yeah.
before with bad haircuts.
Back in the day.
Yeah, no, party in the front. It's this theory that we have, like when we're depthing and sculpting the 3D, that the closer you are to something, the closer the camera is and the viewer, the more depth it has. You will see more volume in a person's face. You'll feel it rotate more. Whereas like a mountain in the way back isn't going to be this super voluminous thing. Like we all know logically it's huge, but it would feel like close to the sky, you know? So it's the party in the front is in reference to what's in front of the camera, and what's closest to the camera gets more of that 3D.
Exponentially amping up the stereo
For
as it gets
sure.
closer to the camera. I mean, on Jaws, you know, one of the things we did kind of creatively was, you know, when that camera's low, sitting in that water, it's not about how close to the sky Chrissy is. It's really just about kind of volumizing her and then bringing that water out into the audience. So the amount of
like
stereo
you're
you have in the front. Yeah. And that's a creative decision you make to go, okay, well, this camera's low and in the water. So in theory, that water should be coming out at us. But like, let's make an experience. Like, let's make that audience feel like they're in the water with her to add to the intensity of that moment. So then you intentionally kind of craft your stereo so that you don't have as much stereo in the back and you're giving all of that stereo to that foreground to create that kind of that experience.
Yeah. I know a lot of people also talk about, you know, like the 3D being a gimmick, which I think when we hear that word, it frustrates us to no end. For you guys though, when you're presented with a project, how do you go about figuring out like, how do we make this a really thoughtful conversion?
I think, you know, oh God.
I don't know.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think one of the first things we kind of do is watch the film. You know, you watch the film to try to kind of understand
the story points of scenes as well as the whole movie and everything. And kind of like, as we talked about earlier, it is part of that process. It is like sound. It is
very
like
much
color that, you know, we need to just go through and make sure we understand what's happening, what the filmmaker wants to convey. And then make sure we mirror it.
Yeah, and I think it's also discussions with the filmmakers. You know, you sit down early, you know, you do a spotting session and say, okay, let's watch the film or watch parts of the film and let's talk about, you know, what you want to convey in these scenes and what your thoughts are in 3D, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And then you start to go, okay, here is the creative direction from the filmmakers. Here's what I know about the film because I've watched it. Now let's kind of sit down and go and craft kind of that depth script and craft that kind of like ebb and flow so that, you know, there are moments in some films where something flies at a camera, or you have those moments that can be considered gimmicky, but you take advantage of those because, again, you're paying attention to the story. Something's flying at the camera, like, yes, that's gonna be kind of a 3D moment. But it's well thought out, well planned, and there's almost always some sort of involvement with a filmmaker and the team, the studio team.
I remember when in 2009 an animated film came out from DreamWorks, Monsters versus Aliens. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yes, it was in 3D.
Where it was in 3D. That's right. Where at the beginning of the film in 3D, there's a very gimmicky moment where a character is playing with a paddle ball and the ball's coming out to the screen. And I remember watching that and being so annoyed and being like, oh my gosh, this is so gimmicky.
Right.
But then only in the past couple of months, I saw for the first time a classic 1950s 3D film, Vincent Price, House of Wax. Which is Martin Scorsese says it's the greatest 3D film ever made. And it's a great movie. It's a great horror movie, a great movie. Vincent Price rules. Like, I was blown away. I'm like, this is I love seeing an old classic movie like that and going like, damn, this holds up. This is great. There's a 5-minute sequence in the middle of that movie where there's a guy with 2 paddle balls like, come right up, come on, step right up. And I'm like, Martin Scorsese says that this is the greatest 3D film of all time. He would never say, I'm going to speak for Scorsese for a second. He would never say this is a gimmicky, like, it just depends on when people I have discovered, in my experience, when they talk about a great 3D film versus a not great 3D film, it is also so dependent on like, is it a great film, period? Is it a not great? Like,
sure.
like a 3D movie that is a movie that you don't think is great, that you're not vibing with, you're going to be like, man, this 3D is not helping it. This is, it's now I'm looking at this, I'm going, this is gimmicky. This is not great.
Yeah.
A great film, period, that is also in 3D, I'm like, this is incredible. It's immersive.
It
It's,
just adds that layer, as you're saying.
So I take back what I said about Monsters vs. Aliens. It was clearly, it was an homage to House of Wax.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
That's very smart. That's a great, like, nerdy 3D
But you're
nerdy
doing
thing.
it in support of the story. It's in support of that moment. It's in support of that homage.
They got it out of the way at the beginning, and then the rest of the movie was fine. And, so I take that back.
I know you and I have had some conversations about that whole thing, because I know the internet sometimes is like up in arms about like, there wasn't enough negative 3D. There wasn't enough coming out. It's not pop outs.
Yeah.
And for me, it is very movie dependent, but it also sometimes it is the genre too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like horror movies, and one of my favorite 3D movies is Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D.
Yeah, sure.
It's great. And it's a lot of this.
Yep.
But to me, it fits that style, that tone. It makes me feel like, oh crap, I'm gonna get murdered by Jason.
Yeah.
You know, it just plays with the immersion a little bit more.
I mean, Sam Raimi, Send Help.
Oh my
That's
God.
Yeah.
Such a great 3D film. Like the boar scene was rad.
Have you seen My Bloody Valentine?
Yes.
Yeah. There's the pickaxe scene where he just kind of like goes right in front of the camera.
I remember that stuff.
I remember watching that in 3D. I got the biggest kick out of that scene, but that's obviously kind of like a 3D moment. But one of the understated 3D moments is just the lamplight. Just kind of like every time the killer like this again, that light beam comes out, the miner like,
And also another like
so cool
beloved film of the past 20 years, Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And you had experience working on that
we
film.
worked on it together.
I think
the whole studio won.
I think
that
at that point I had left to go have some boring office job. I think I left at that point.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing you guys talking about like, getting a couple of shots in from Mad Max and like before it was color graded and going like, I don't know what he's doing down in Australia. Like, I don't know if this is going to work.
Sure.
And then that movie came out and it's a masterpiece. And that movie has one of the most gimmicky moments of 3D, you know, like right when the rig is like crashing, it's like, whoa, the steering wheel comes out.
Yeah.
But it fits the style, the exaggerated style of that world and of that film. So like, yeah, when people mention that, they go, well, there wasn't enough of this. I go, it just depends on what you're watching.
Yeah, you're not trying to force it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the
biggest thing. You don't want a 3D for 3D's sake, because I think that's what pushes to a gimmick.
Yeah.
Whereas when you can use that element of a gimmick, of an amusement park ride, something coming out at you,
it's not important the story, right?
Like even all of the Marvel franchise and everything, in the Marvel logo, when Cap throws the shield in 3D, the shield comes out at you. It doesn't come out at you in 2D.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes.
It actually kind of fades off, so you see more Cap, but we got this like extra moment where the shield just keeps coming at you.
Yeah, sure.
And you had more right there in the logo.
Gosh.
And I think you also have scenes, where if you look at the way a film is most films are kind of framed, there's a lot of dialogue in most of those, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of over the shoulder shots, A/B conversations between characters. And in terms of things kind of like coming negative in the audience, it's one thing that I talk to filmmakers a lot about. It's like, how do you want to handle that? When you're shooting it over and you're shooting an A/B conversation, or you're shooting like, let's say a wide, but there's rocks and trees in the foreground, but you really should be looking in here. How do you want to handle that foreground stuff? Because if we want to do this accurately, that's going to be really far into the audience, right? Because you're supposed to be kind of looking way in the background. So all this is coming out. But there's a creative, spin on that where we can push that more positive or further into the screen to make it less distracting. So sometimes a lack of those things coming out of screen is an intentional choice. And it's an intentional choice to make sure that the audience is always paying attention to what they're paying attention to, and the 3D doesn't become a distraction.
Right.
So it's something we talk to filmmakers a lot about. How do you want to handle those moments? And a lot of times it's, like, I want to play that foreground stuff more conservative. I want to push it in because I want to look past Alphabet, and I want to be looking at Ariana Grande. So let's kind of keep her a little bit more positive, so we look at where we need to look.
Those are also some great 3D films, by the way. Wicked and Wicked Part 2. Or Wicked Part 1 and Wicked for Good. Those are great 3D movies. Those are really fun experiences. And you guys, everything you were mentioning too, I'm thinking back and I'm like, the scenes where like the big action moments were happening. the moments where Cynthia's going, that's like a 3D moment.
Yeah.
We pushed the shit out of that. That was awesome.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
the camera pulls back. She's on the sky.
Oh my gosh.
There it is.
Yeah.
More musicals should be in 3D, by the way. I just want to say, like, that's such a great. That was
They're
a great
wild. Yeah,
They're wild.
They're fun.
We did a tremendous amount of like pre-production, like planning
Yeah.
for that film, Jason and
Yeah.
I. And I remember,
And that's a director who's done 3D before.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Not
She loves
just G.I. Joe Retaliation.
Right.
Yeah.
Step up 3D,
Step
y'all.
Up 3D.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
You want to
man,
talk
I forgot.
about a good 3D movie? You got to go see Step Up 3D because John Chu, he knew what he was doing for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure that must make the working relationship much easier when they understand that format.
Understand it, like appreciate it, but that's
Yeah.
and again, you could be working with a director who doesn't, isn't really familiar with, and then to use the term that you used before, like convert them, like through the process, you can show them, what you can do and how you can support their story, and I've had the experience a lot of times where at the end they were like, this is how to see the film.
Yeah.
This is like one of the best compliments you can get is
Yeah.
this is my favorite.
And then I love like getting the repeat customer as well too. Like
Yes.
Yeah.
they'd come in, like even though it had been a while since he'd worked with us at SDFX, he came in, he like you could tell the language that we use and everything came back, and it did have
Wow.
that comfort. So it's great to bring people into the world, and even better to hold on to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, let's work again. Like,
Yeah.
I can't wait
for
to
sure.
do this.
I mean, one of the most exciting things for us was when we found out that Dan Trachtenberg was doing Predator.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Because we were friendly with him, and so we talked to him, and we're like,
I'm sure.
Predator 3D.
I'm sure it was already in the works. It was already in the works, but
Oh.
when we talked to him, it was not like announced yet.
Yeah.
So when we were like annoying him with like,
Yeah.
you got to do your movie in 3D.
Yeah.
We when it was announced, we were like, it was us. We convinced him. No, we did not. I'm sure.
He was like, oh, it's already in the works. I couldn't say anything.
absolutely- I was watching that interview with you guys and everything, and I remember at one point they were like, what happens if he throws it? And I'll just leave it at that. And he gave you that.
Oh.
I had just done that. And I was sitting there, I was watching you, and I was like, I know what happens.
I know.
I was like, you're going to love
I know
it.
that.
I was like, I know
Incredible.
what's
I know
going to
that
happen.
moment.
Yeah, it was so fun to like
Yeah.
have that moment, especially like I know
Yeah.
how much you guys like love this
Yeah.
stuff and everything.
So
but like
good.
Yeah.
to have that, like see you guys ready
Man.
for it and then have the answers in my head and be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you're going to love this.
It was
Yeah,
a really, really fun experience to watch that movie in 3D. So much so that I messaged Dan immediately, and I was like, if you do another Predator movie in 2D, I'm not going to go see it.
Yeah.
You better be serious. It's like, all right, man.
It was,
From
it
here
was
on
fun.
out.
That was a great one. So we're
so
cool.
I'm probably more so than you and Augustine. I'm a huge formats guy.
Yes.
And there's always this conversation of like, is this a format or is it just like a storytelling tool? Where do you think 3D falls compared to things like IMAX and all that
Yeah.
stuff?
I feel it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it is definitely its format. We go into the IMAX and stuff. You have like ScreenX.
Yeah, you're talking about premium format.
And
That's
it
content now.
definitely has its format and its space in this like cinematic universe we all love. But again, as referencing how we did is when you ebb and flow the 3D and get it to work, that's where it comes the tool. And that's where it like just makes it such an immersive experience and gets you to find a great film, have it go through this process, and then just love it even more with an extra step.
And then
to
you
it,
find
so.
those moments that are different in 3D than they are in 2D. And then there are some films that are, I would argue you watch it in 3D versus 2D. It's it's still the same film, but it's a very different experience.
Yeah.
You look at something like Ready Player One,
Yep.
and you watch that in 3D. Like I walked out of that movie going, this is an incredible film in 3D. It is so much fun.
It's so much fun. I mean, Steven Spielberg, I feel like he made Ready Player One because he's like, I just want to do this car chase sequence in 3D.
Oh my
He crushed it, dude.
Oh my
He
God.
like knocked it out of the
It's
park. That
so
thing
good
is
in 3D.
insane.
It's so
I went and I saw Transformers 1 in 3D.
Oh, the animated
with
Transformers.
4DX.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no greater, more immersive experience of being thrown around in that movie.
Yeah.
It was insane.
You get into that train sequence and that train's just
Oh
kind of
my
rattling around,
God.
and that rock storm is like coming in.
My popcorn
like,
was flying out of my bag. And I was
Or
like,
the
this
or
is
the
great.
race or the race scene, Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so much fun.
I mean, we're talking about formats. If I can just be a little bit bitter for a second. I feel like I love IMAX, great company. They know what they're doing.
Yep.
But I feel like IMAX has gotten really good marketing over the past 10, 15
Yeah,
years.
for me.
So from Adam specifically.
When are they
You're
gonna
really
do
good
some
about doing the
stuff?
formats and saying, here's your
Jesus.
formats. Yeah, it's great.
Hire Adam is what I'm saying. But like I have felt since kind of leaving the 3D industry and just being a fan and a consumer and a defender of 3D that I'm like, 3D, it sometimes gets a bad rap because I feel like the marketing has been lacking. And I think sometimes 3D is tough to market.
Right.
It's tough to tell people about 3D without having it. Like even now, we cannot pull up examples for you to watch on YouTube and put your little glasses on. We can't cha-cha these still frames. You can go, oh, that looks really cool. Like we can't do that. That's what cha-cha means. But I wanted to ask you guys, being in the 3D industry, because again, going back to that interview with Dan Trachtenberg and his producer, Stefan, I pitched to them, I'm like, what I would do if I were in charge of this stuff is that I would do 3D specific trailers, for example, to try to market.
Oh, sure.
To try to market like a great
the 2D like kind of break the crop like
absolutely absolutely like a great like Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn films did that within the film itself.
Wolverine where like sword would come out of the sword.
But,
the big hallway fight.
But even then,
I did a lot of that there.
I would love you see a teaser trailer come out, then you see like trailer A, and then in between trailer A and trailer B, I would do you can only see this trailer in theaters. It's not released online. So people would have to go online and describe like, dude, I saw some new footage from this upcoming movie. Like I saw a whole new scene and it's just to show off how great a 3D sequence is. That was my pitch. And producer Stefan was like, it's not a bad idea. So I'm proud of that. But like in terms of where you guys are and what your position is as stereographers, what would you like to see happen with like the marketing of 3D, selling 3D, trying to
convince an audience to go to 3D?
What are some thoughts that you discussions? I'm sure you guys talk about this stuff all the time. Keep it diplomatic, but I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time.
I think part of it is like what we're doing right now, right? Like it's just talking about it, and I think it gets kind of a bad rap because people don't know everything that goes into creating a 3D film, the craft and the artistry, and that it's not this push button technical thing that happens at the end. That there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artists, that work with us that are incredibly talented and that are well versed in traditional art and photography and drawing, that take all of those skills to craft a 3D film and a 3D image. And a lot of people don't know that, and they don't know about all the planning that goes in there. And, they see, like we were talking about before, about the lack of things that might come out of screen. It's like, those are intentional and creative choices that are driven by story. And, I think it's having conversations like this, and it's just talking about it more and talking about the process. And, and also part of it, it's making 3D accessible to people. I think, to your point, years ago, people went to a lot of 3D movies and every movie was in 3D. And maybe they shouldn't have been, or maybe the 3D was mishandled or was pushed too far and they have this kind of bad taste in their mouth about 3D. And
again, we're talking about The Last Airbender. That
just in general. And I think some of the conversations that I've had while working on films is like, I've heard a few times, I don't normally like 3D. Or 3D makes me nauseous, but that was really
Dude, I hear
cool
it all the time.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
I think also as well to like piggyback on some of this, and we've been sitting up here and talking about all these cool action movies and these action scenes, but branching into different genres. I would love to see more horror in 3D. But
absolutely.
Like the action and those exciting moments lend itself to 3D. I would argue the hardest thing to do in 3D is for people sitting on a stage talking, because you know what it looks like, what people look like, and so like to make sure you're getting people right, because like so much of movies is exposition and people talking and then leading up to the big moment. So like getting some different genres where like maybe you don't look at it and think like that's a great 3D movie, there's all this explosions and everything going on, but just having those moments or different films and genres that can bring in more of a wider audience to 3D to enjoy it and just be that immersive and, just sit down and watch the film as it is in this format.
I mean, Scorsese did that like whimsical Hugo. Just doing different types of genre, I think would also be,
absolutely.
Animated films, action movies, we got that. Sci-fi movies, we got that. But like some great dramas would be fantastic.
I mean, look at Titanic.
Like, that's literally what I was
right? Like the first two acts of Titanic, it's all drama. It's not the boat sinking. I mean, that's really cool in 3D, and there's a really great moments, but it's about the drama. And I think one of the things that people think is that, a dramatic film or drama scenes aren't really good for 3D. They are really good for 3D, because if you take Titanic, or even if you look at Jaws, if you look at the USS Indianapolis speech, that sequence right there is made for 3D, and it's intentionally sculpted in a way that you want to draw the audience into those moments. There's creative intent behind, what we did there. And it's amplifying the stereo in a way that makes you feel like by the end of that speech, you're nose to nose with Quint. It brings you into the intensity of that scene and the heaviness of the scene. So, there are scenes that most people wouldn't think would be great in 3D, but they really, really are. And it's sometimes not the sequences and things that you normally think of.
I had a whole new appreciation for Titanic when I saw it because I went to the 20th Century Lot to go see it in 3D. And I had not seen it for maybe like 10 years up to that point. And it was really incredible. I thought, man, this movie in 3D seems like such an odd choice because, it's in most of it drama, and then you're in the moment,
watch
these intimate moments with Rose and Jack and all the supporting characters. You really feel like you're on the ship with them. And then it goes down and you're like, I want to get out of here. But
even the opening sort of like just establishing the scale.
Like the all aboard sequence where everybody's kind of boarding the ship, right?
It's really great. That's I like to put that one on when I have people over the house and I'm like, let's watch sometimes I'll just do a 3D movie night that's just scenes. Like I'm just like taking in and out different Blu-rays. I'm like, okay, now we got to do the Spider-Verse. Okay, now we got to do And Titanic is another one because I think everyone on Earth has seen the film. The same as like with the first Jurassic Park, so that you can really almost compare in a way, because you're familiar with the movie, or at least we've seen it in the past, and to be able to see it in that new way, you go, oh wow, this is really additive. I can see, versus like throwing on a movie that no one's ever seen and then just experiencing that for the first time in 3D. That's going to be the standard.
If you go back to Titanic and you go back to those sequences where they're just kind of boarding the ship, like that first shot of Rose, it's that top-down camera shot, and the door kind of swings open, the camera comes down, and boom, her hat comes out. That is such, like, if you look at that in 2D, you're like, okay, like that's an establishing shot.
Great moment.
Kate Winslet, right? But in 3D, it just really brings you into like that character and establishing her as kind of one of the main characters of the film. It's a great shot.
What would you say are some of the things that an audience would never consider is like something that you put so much thought and depth into? Because we're talking about really great moments, like Rose coming out of that car to reveal, Kate Winslet in the movie with that amazing costume. How much thought goes into a shot? That one single particular shot.
Loads of
tremendous
iterations, making sure you're getting like everything rotoed and isolated that you needed, so you can add the proper depth to it and stuff. And I think to answer kind of your question, the part that you don't think of, one, I would just say people in general. You want to make sure people feel natural, but also environments and sets and stuff like that. You know, if you move a wall too positive, too far away from a character, you're going to make that character and that actor feel tiny and small, or vice versa. If it's too close to them, they're going to feel really big. So making sure we're getting these environments to feel natural, and I think that's what helps you kind of forget you're in those 3D moments sometimes, because it just looks so natural. You just feel like you are there as the viewer.
And also too, when it comes to like the sets, if you think about like a Titanic or you think about a Wicked, like those set pieces, the costumes, they are, Titanic, especially when you're on the boat is a character. That environment is a character. You have to pay attention to the detail and the scale, because that is such a huge part of the film. And when you're talking about Wicked, it's like, you're talking about a Broadway musical, and the attention to detail and the set pieces and the costumes, like attention has to be paid to all of that. That's not something that's kind of like an afterthought. It's very much front and center in our minds of like, making sure that is represented in the detail and the depth and the accuracy of those environments is represented.
You also reminded me too of another thing I love about 3D is like Wicked reminds me of the original masterpiece Wizard of Oz. That was also turned into a 3D film, and I have that on Blu-ray. And to throw that on, to see classic movies that like had the matte painting background, and then when that's put into 3D, and you're like, wait a minute, like you're like, I know that's a painting, but there's like,
it feels less flat.
It's great. It's really great. I love that.
But you're talking about scale. I know scale is a big thing, because like Titanic, you got to worry about miniaturization, making the boat in really wide shots, making sure it doesn't feel tiny. But one of my favorites is Ant-Man. where it's the
Oh,
exact
man.
opposite.
You're going the other
Yeah.
way.
You're usually doing
You're
that.
using stereo to
Yeah.
enhance that effect.
Yeah. There's parts where like, you take Ant-Man, you take Anthony, who we all love.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
R.I.P.
How could you?
Sorry, I went
Don't bring
there.
it up.
But yeah, you bring them out into the audience more and away from the background, and you're
Yeah.
getting that element of it's coming out, but
Mhm.
because you're then comparing how far he's coming out to the background, it'll make something
Yep.
feel smaller
Yep.
or tinier.
Wow.
And that's when you can use stereo to really enhance an effect or a story. And
Yeah.
the flip side of that is making sure that the stereo doesn't take away, doesn't
Mhm.
deter, doesn't miniaturize the scene. Going back to Jaws, it's like you want to, you're kind of fighting the whole gimmick is like we need a bigger boat, right?
Mhm.
But it's like, but you can't make the boat feel tiny on the ocean.
Right.
But you also want to enhance the fact that it's just three guys on a boat in the
Sure.
middle of the water
Yeah.
and there's no
Isolated.
help,
There's
right?
some
Yeah.
great.
So-
There's some great shots. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about Jaws, period. But like, there are some great storytelling moments, and
Yeah.
to see that in 3D, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any shots that you going into it were not sure how it would play in 3D?
Ooh.
And when you saw it in 3D, you're like, wow, this actually
that's a
was
great question.
either
Yeah.
it moved you emotionally or just really excited you.
Ooh. I was actually going to go the opposite when you started that, like
Ooh.
going
Ah.
for Titanic.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the miniaturization. I remember I had one of the shots, wide shot. It's the tail end of the boat. People were falling off. I went into it. I spent hours. I got like every single person. I was giving them different Z rates and coming out at all these different rates. Put it up on the screen, and it looked like a toy.
Yep.
And
you're
the
like,
sterographer at the time's like, you're gonna
Sorry,
take
man.
all your work and
Oh,
just
man.
crush it.
Compress it.
And
Yeah,
I was
it
like,
tiny.
okay, but I mean, it was a valuable lesson
Yeah.
and everything like that. But
Yeah.
That's
but yeah, that
hilarious.
was
That's
like one of
great.
those moments where you're an artist and you're paying attention to all these little details and everything, and then you get up and you go, actually, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then we go back and kind of revamp it and make sure that it fits. And
Well, and even the opposite effect, I remember, we would put, you try to figure out like maybe this moves too fast and you won't see it. And then you watch it on a TV screen and you're like, oh
And you notice it.
God, it needs
Yeah.
to be moved. Yeah.
I had a great experience with Aquaman 2. And when Oren would grab like the black trident, and then you get that really cool zoom into his eye, and you get all these flashes of the memory and the
Yeah.
and having depth to that and seeing like this part, then this scene,
Right.
actually helped read it a little bit better and understand what's going on. Whereas in 2D, it could like sometimes be a little chaotic, or it's just this thing.
Yeah.
But like getting that next and next and next was.
And then
awesome.
the last shot in that movie where Patrick Wilson eats a burger with a
Eats
cockroach on it.
Yeah.
Hilarious in 3D.
Yeah.
Even better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hilarious in 3D. We also, I know there was always that long running. There's like always a pee joke in the DC movies for a long time,
Yeah.
and Aquaman has it. We had a special pee guy to make sure the stream is good and
the curving.
Frank,
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
This shot's got your name on it, Frank. Somebody needs some pee put into 3D.
Yeah.
I'm your guy.
I'm your guy. He's just there in a corner. Yeah. I think, going back to like not knowing if a shot's going to work really well in 3D, I think, on Transformers 1, you get that kind of final sequence with the Decepticons, and you get these close-ups of the chest and they're being stamped. They're kind of being branded. And there was a shot, and I saw it for the first time, and it was just enormous in 3D. And it was just a close-up of just the hot iron just kind of falling on the ground. And I was like, whoa. And it was just so big and aggressive. And I was like, yeah. That's it. I was like,
awesome.
and then we crafted the whole sequence around just being big and over the top and heavy, because like this is a big emotional heavy moment. Like make the 3D big and heavy, and don't tone it down. Make it big and make those branding irons, really come out and put a lot of depth and detail in there. Like go, let that sequence be really big. So I was really surprised to see that shot and the sequence of shots where I was like, I didn't think that pushing us this far would work, but I was like, this actually works very well. So we're leaning into it. We're going to do it.
I love that film because it does start as sort of a regular, normal kids film. And by the end of Transformers 1, you're like, this is so epic. It's so dramatic.
It's
and
great.
so,
I remember
like,
watching the cut of
yeah.
that, and I saw the shots, where Optimus, no, it wasn't Optimus, it was
Megatron.
Megatron, yes.
Yeah.
It was, Megatron's like ripping apart Sentinel Prime, and there's the close-up of him like ripping. I was like, oh my. And I remember messaging my producer, Ryan, I was like, this film gets heavy. And like when we started to talk about the 3D, it was like just leaning into those dramatic moments where he's there with Sentinel Prime, and you could just feel the anger and the tension. It was like, this needs to be big.
Yeah.
This needs to be, the stereo needs to be big and chunky and like, because that's the weight of the scene. And I remember talking to Josh about like, this is what we're going to do. Like, I think we're going to be big. And I think, it's going to help these emotional moments. And it went over really, really well.
That's awesome.
Well, we've talked about a lot of different types of movies. We talked about animated movies, live action films, and the movies that incorporate a lot of CG. How does converting something to stereo, like how do those pipelines work together? Do you guys usually get assets that you turn to stereo, or like what is that process like?
Yeah, we do a bit of both. Like we have a lot of talented artists that can work on a multitude of different shots and types of shots. But when we can, we like to work with the 2D vendors and stuff, and they will send us the assets. And then what we actually do is take them apart, convert everything on its own, and then we put it back together. So we're like kind of doing some stereo comp work, bringing it all back together to make sure it still matches the 2D, but now you get like that clean smoke, or holograms are always a big thing. We love.
I love holograms.
I
love it.
Oh, I think I remember some of those challenges for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Or like smudges on glass and stuff. Like shooting through actual glass is really hard, and it's like one of those things where it's like, but if you just actually put that in with some VFX and give us the assets, you get a really clean, great look. And it's similar to like the Jaws, like feeling underneath the water, seeing through the car, seeing the shape of the windshield just based on the reflections and stuff like that.
For sure. And we've also had experiences where you've got hybrid shots, you've got rendered stereo. And you're converting a character around. I think in Days of Future Past, it was Quicksilver when he breaks out Magneto, and everything was kind of like in bullet time. Well, the bullet time, the kind of like slowed down stuff was all kind of rendered in stereo, and we converted him, and then we had to figure out how to kind of fit him into place so that he worked within the stereo of the scene. So we can get assets that are multiple different types, and then we can kind of make sure that everything works together, because although something is rendered or shot or converted, it's all 3D at the end of the day, right? So all the pieces can fit together. You just have to figure out how to kind of manipulate them.
Remember that we had a similar situation on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where they sent a Z depth, I think, of the turtles, and we had to kind of figure out how to like rig them into the shot so it fit
to make it work.
Because I think we kind of got them late in the process too, which I guess kind of feeds into my next question. Like, how early do you guys actually get involved with making a movie, regardless of what type of a film it is?
Because you mentioned earlier too at the top of the conversation that like you'll sit down and watch the film to then
ideally
figure out what the direction can be, and kind of what the different ebbs and flows of a stereo edition can be, and then you present those to a director. But I remember working on movies that like they're making the movie, they're filming the movie, they're editing the movie, and we're getting what we're getting. So what is the most common, I guess, part where you guys will enter the process and go, okay, now we're part of this filmmaking?
We enter in at any stage, really. Like every film that was
like it is all of the above.
You're right. It's Jaws came out 50 years ago. You're right. So
like when you look at something like Jaws,
we're talking about some camera angles.
But you look at those films and you're like, okay, they're already done. I mean, Free Guy was already done and colored, and then they decided, okay, we're going to go 3D. So you had the full film, and then you could, you were dimensionalizing at that point. But then, there are sometimes we have really kind of surface level conversations about the look of the film and whether something will work in 3D or how we would handle it. I remember having a few calls early on for Mutant Mayhem, and they were talking about, okay, like if everything has kind of like sketch lines,
dude,
like how do you handle that? It's like, well, they're just kind of, I mean, without seeing it, it's like they would just kind of be at the same depth of wherever those sketch lines are. So like if it's on a shoulder versus a hand versus, you just need to make sure they're laying appropriately, but shouldn't be a problem. So those conversations happen well before we even saw any of the film. And then to your point, and even for Jason with his experience at Marvel, we can be on a film and VFX is still being done. Pickups are still happening. Shooting is still happening.
And updates and stuff. I mean, we've gone down to the literal wire. Dudes at times and stuff.
One of the things we do really well, because we've been doing this so long, is VFX in the film industry is a funny kind of industry. And, when you're talking about the editing and the polishing and the finishing of a film and the VFX, that goes late, right? So we have to be very nimble, and we have to be able to pivot and adjust, regardless of where we slotted in the process. We have to be able to deliver, and we have to be able to hit that kind of high quality bar that we set ourselves up for. So, we have built processes and a pipeline and a way we work based on being able to pivot, especially on Marvel films.
You get so many where like, it's a set, they filmed it like in camera and that's great. And then maybe they have to go back and do reshoots. And then you get the reshoot and the character's on a blue screen.
Right.
And so you go back and like, you got to then match what you did to the practical set.
Adjust the roto because the roto doesn't match exactly.
Yeah.
And you're not talking one shot, you're talking hundreds or dozens, and maybe that happens late. So we're just built to operate at that speed.
Our pipeline's very procedural and it works great for that. And it works great for like, oh, we got a last minute plate update. They did a lighting change, just run it back to the pipe. And then it works great for making some creative changes as well too. It lets you go back and go, you know what? I watched this in context and that shot pops. You know, we're going to go back and adjust it. This doesn't work.
That's awesome.
So like, part of our process and everything is no matter, like ideally, we're talking with filmmakers at the beginning of the movie and throughout as well. But sometimes like they're busy people, you know. So sometimes they see a little bit here and a little bit there, and they go, you know what, this
doesn't
area,
work.
this doesn't work for me, and we're built to go, okay, got it, and then we can go back and
and it's
apologize to our artists and everything for the work.
I'm sorry, shot has changed.
We're gonna do this, but
I remember that
because of the way we're built. It's it's us just kind of going to the filmmakers, the director, to be like, don't worry, make those changes. We got you. Like we can fold that in. We can you do what you need to do, and we're going to be able to take care of folding that into the rest of the work and make it work and make it fit. So they can just do what they normally do, worry about creating the film, crafting the film that they want, and we're there to help support them.
Yeah, I know a lot of times in review, in review, we'd play shot and then you'd always hear context. And you had to let me see like the 2-3 shots before and after.
100%.
Just so you can see like, is it flowing? Does anything pop out? Does it feel weird? Is that background element too far out on that shot versus that shot? It really gave me like, sitting in those reviews really gave me a real appreciation to the craftsmanship of making. It's not just the background goes there, the characters go here, and then do that and repeat.
You're doing these one-offs.
Because we're working on this. We're working on the shot, you know, from when the camera starts to the camera stops, and it's very easy to just like tunnel vision on that shot. But like context, I mean, I say that constantly every day, you know.
Who watches the context?
So and then you see it and it's like you don't want to get lost, you know, in the forest and everything when you're making a 3D film, and that's like you got to step back and look at it and the whole, again, look at those ebbs and flows, which I know we've mentioned earlier. Make sure it all works.
And then for us, like we have our own asset management system called Flux. You know, we looked at what was available out there and nothing quite fit what we needed it to do. So we built our own. So we have a really, really talented development team that created an asset management system for us so that people like Jason and I can look at a film as a whole from a 30,000 foot view and go, okay, here's the entire film. Here's where all the shots are in production. And then I can go on a shot level and see all the different assets, see all the different notes. And then in accompaniment to that, we have Helios, our stereo player, that allows us to bring up
it so much.
We click a button and it brings in the entire film or sections of the film in 3D, and we can just watch it and go, is this working? Is this fitting? And then we can do annotations on shots and text.
How do I get there?
Like,
what?
when you talk about just kind of the advancements that we do, you know, as a company, we kind of set what that quality bar is, and then we push our tech internally to hit that. You know, we're always pushing it to like meet what we needed to do. So when we had to pivot during COVID to working from home, it was, okay, how do we rethink how we do what we do? We're not going to be sitting together in a theater. Okay, you know, these are the things that we need from Flux. These are the things we need built into Helios. How do we review Jaws from home? How do I make sure all the pieces are going to fit at home?
My first COVID review was off my iPhone. It was iPhone plugged into the TV, like VLC streamed to the phone. And then it was like, even just to be like, does this work? Like we were like, we're just like, can it work? And I was like, it was so hot. Like
my phone's gonna catch fire.
Like, I was like, I did a review and I might explode, but we got there.
And that's how you kind of make sure that, you know, when you're talking about context, it's like we can link up context. You know, an artist can go in there and say, okay, here's the shots before, here's the shots. Oh, here's the matching shot to that shot. Okay, I want to make sure my little piece fits into the larger whole, and then we're in there to just kind of massage it out and make sure that everything kind of fits together as a full film.
Mm-hmm.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has some wonderful Sally Field as Aunt May scenes, and I believe they're bookended by the most insane Electro sequences in any superhero comic book. So you really have to take all that into account.
You have to like figure out how is this going to work with these jump cuts.
Right.
Yeah.
Really good drama. And then look at this great, look, he's in jail. It's crazy.
But sometimes that works for a storytelling device because you want to juxtapose the two, right? So you're going back and forth. You've got Sally Field here and you're playing the stereo, maybe more conservative. And then you go to the electro shots and they're big and it's just like, and it works. You're like, because, well, that makes sense. You're juxtaposing the two.
Yeah.
And that's even a lot of like what we do. Cause like when you're talking in 3D, if you think of it like a shoebox diorama, it's like sometimes you can keep the whole 3D but move it closer or further.
Yeah.
And like so for scenes like that where if it's like the shoebox for the electrodes are out here but Aunt May's back here, we kind of bring those closer together and make sure it all
That's part of
lines
the
up.
depth grade that
So
we do.
so like that way also as a viewer your eyes aren't going backwards, forwards,
Right.
forwards.
Because most viewers won't realize that, like when you're looking at stereo, your eyes are crossing, right?
Yep.
So hopefully it's just for brief moments. So
Yeah.
part of what we do to what Jason was saying is that you want to make sure your point of interest is right around screen plane so your eyes aren't crossing and there's not discomfort. So what we'll do kind of at the end of the film when you do, you'll have a color grade that's done at the DI, but we're doing a depth grade where we're making sure that
eye is
where
comfortable throughout.
that it's comfortable and you're supporting the story and your eye is going exactly where it needs to go, and that's part of where the shot lies relative to the
that plays into like the foreground elements on the shoulders. You don't want someone's eye to go down to like a shoulder.
That's
you want it to stay on the point of interest of the next shot.
That's one of my favorite things about 3D is that great 3D will help your eye move to what you're supposed to be, like what the movie is asking you to look at. But then you mentioned Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. And the style of that movie is so good. And I got the 3D Blu-ray. Shout out to the German company Turbine. We had to import that 3D Blu-ray from Germany. One of my favorite moments in that film is towards the beginning when the turtles are up on a rooftop. There's a tree off to the left that the first time you're watching the movie, you might not notice because you're looking at the turtles. Second time you watch the movie, you can kind of wander your eyes. And there's a tree that has a really cool little sketchy, scratchy, just a beautiful little that's a tree. And I just love the artistry involved in it. So it's really cool that 3D brought that out.
One of the things that we talked about off camera was, trying to be creative with 3D. And one of my favorite things was on Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which surprised me. And it's not even necessarily a 3D thing specifically, but you can only do it in 3D because having those two eyes allows you to do that. We did this cool effect where we made the eyes shimmer. Can you guys explain doing that, but also trying to incorporate creativity into the thing?
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter walked so sinners could run. Really doing what sinners were doing. Way ahead of it.
I think doing the shimmering effect, it's kind of intentionally creating an uncomfortable effect on the audience. It's creating what's called like retinal rivalry. And it's when something is discrepant between the two eyes and you can't quite make sense of it. So it feels a little off. So
it's a little shiny.
Shiny kind of gives a
kind of like if you're wearing polarized sunglasses and you like catch a back of a windshield or something on a car and it's got a weird shimmer like in one eye
and not the other
because it's polarized, like so your polarization isn't matching up,
right?
So it kind of looks like that, but
so what's happening is either you're catching a highlight or a color in one eye that you aren't in the other. So what we did on the eyes was we added color in the eyes that was only in the left eye and a different color in the right eye. So when they combine those two eyes, there's two left and right eyes in stereo combined, and you looked at that character's eyes, you're like, it's uncomfortable. It gives you this kind of offsetting feeling because you're like, something's not right.
It's one of those great moments where when you know the rules and you know the foundation, you know when to break them. And that's a great break of being like, I can make this effect and I can make this, like make you experience it so much more by just like bending that rule and breaking it.
And it goes back to the conversation we had about Ant-Man where you're intentionally manipulating to give a sense of scale, but
I remember this effect you guys are describing. It was also in a movie I worked on, Iron Man 3. Where the extremis soldiers that had that extra power, whatever it was in there, they had that glowy red eyes as well, the orangey effect, and it's awesome.
Is that a conversation that happens like at the very beginning of the process, or could you be like months into it and you're like, you know what, this might look cool here?
Again, it's both. Like there's some stuff going on at the moment and stuff, and we're like able to talk about it and be like, this would look really cool, like let's try it out and stuff.
And you could be in a review with a director and they'd be like, this is cool. but what if?
What if?
And you're like,
are you doing one of those like,
okay.
I got a little something
Yeah.
up my sleeve, my back pocket. Look at this.
so I wanted to
version.
try
What do you
something
think?
nutty. Here's a
Yeah.
wedge. Here's a different look at the shot, and here's something
Yeah.
we tried. And yeah, very, very much so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How important is it to have the director involved throughout the entire process? Because I also feel like, based on our experience, you kind of create a relationship with the director in hopes that they feel comfortable
Mhm.
with letting you kind of take the reins. And obviously they'll come in, they'll review stuff, they'll give their opinion, or they'll tell you like, maybe this needs to be, more in depth, less in depth, or whatever. But how much of a collaboration is it, and how much of it is it you guys really kind of like assuming the responsibility and the creative of the whole project?
Yeah. Oh, that's where it's great. Kind of as we talked about at the beginning, if we have our look dev sequence, if we can go to the director, like maybe we talk to them at the beginning, explain our process and everything. But then the second time we meet them, if we can get into a theater and say, here's 2 minutes of your film, here's 10 minutes of your film, this is what it's going to look like. Is this working for you? Is this not working for you?
Yeah.
And then exactly as you said, then we take that responsibility and we go through and execute it throughout the film. And then ideally, if we can get in there multiple times and they're going, yep, I love all of this, or again, this sequence isn't quite working for me. And you're like, great, we'll go back and tweak it and make sure.
We love to have the directors and filmmakers involved from the get-go because, one of the things that we really want to emphasize is that it's not about us. It's not our film. We're there as kind of experts in the field to help guide, the stereo decisions, but it's really their film. So it's great when they really want to be involved, or at least come in for those initial sessions, the conversations, the spotting sessions, and maybe looking over kind of the look dev material so that they feel like, okay, we feel comfortable that these guys are going to carry forward like something that's really cool, and that they care about the film, as much as I do. So having them involved is great. We don't have to have that, but it's great when they can at least come in, we can have that conversation, and then we've been doing it long enough to be able to go, okay, I can interpret what's working for them and what isn't, and I can go ahead and start sculpting the film, and then we'll bring them in when time allows, because they are very busy. Their schedules are...
They're overseeing everything else in the theater.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you don't always get them. We're lucky when we get them at the beginning and we can have those conversations, and then maybe they don't come in for weeks. We were fortunate enough to review with John a number of times for Wicked Part 1 and for Good. And Steven, reviewing large chunks of the film with him, but we had calls with them and talked, with them about what they wanted to do, with their film. So, it doesn't, awesome. We don't need it. But it's always great when they want to do it, especially if they don't know a lot about 3D. It's great to take them along for the ride and just be like, okay, well, let's just talk about it. And let's just talk about what we can do creatively to help support your story. And then a lot of times it's kind of an eye-opening experience, like, oh, wow, I didn't know we could do that. And they didn't know how much creative control we could have.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, is a lot of directors will sometimes tend to think of shooting in 3D. And when you shoot in 3D, that's your shot. That's your stereo. It's locked in. And we can sit down and go, no, like, if that tree is bothering you, or it's not sticking out enough for you, we can make that some attention to it.
We can poke you in the eye with some branches.
And if you want that, we'll do it. Let's go.
What is some stuff that filmmakers, if maybe they haven't done anything in 3D, or maybe they don't know the technology that well, what is some stuff that, from your experience, filmmakers can do on set that will assist with the conversion process? I know like flyaway hairs are hell. Or I've heard a lot of things of like you incorporating LiDAR scanning on sets to help understand, distances. I don't know. Does any of that stuff help?
Yeah, like, do you guys get access to like reference photography sometimes? If there's like, hey, what does this look like in this shot? What was it like that day on the set? Do we have any pictures that we can like,
100%. And sometimes you'll even ask for like digidoubles. For The Last Jedi, we got digidoubles for Mark Hamill.
Wow. Cool.
And we'll ask for digidoubles. Even on Wicked, we used digidoubles, like 3D head scans for some of our main characters, just to make sure that the sculpting is 100% accurate. So we can get access to that stuff, which helps kind of in the process and helps make sure that everything is accurate as possible.
That's awesome. Last Jedi, throne room fight scene. So good.
I love that scene. I love that movie. I love that scene. Watching that scene, I was like, there it is. There's
that moment
where they're like arguing over they're fighting over the saber in the air. That in 3D is so good. And it cracks.
We talk about how like the accessibility of 3D is sometimes very challenging because it may be in theaters for a week or two. So it feels like if you don't go and see it immediately, you might miss out on it. Do you guys think that's kind of the trend now, and it has the chance to evolve? Or what what can like technology companies and all these other companies that are involved in 3D do to kind of try to help make it more accessible, other than just being on Apple Vision Pro or a VR device? Like, what do we got to do? Whose door do we need to kick down?
I think a big thing we're seeing now is 3D TVs without glasses. Glasses free.
I actually saw at Cinegear, I saw a monitor that had that.
And like every
I'm curious.
year,
I'm really curious.
They're advancing. And if we could get back into that, I feel home market of a big TV, everyone can sit down on the sofa and see the 3D perfectly and like every viewing angle. I think that's a huge way to get it, so you get that experience. You can have your 3D movie nights. You get your mini theater,
dream, right?
Kind of experience for it, to everyone see it and not just be like, because the headsets are cool and you get in, but that is very much just you.
It's very singular, and that's kind of where 3D is now. But you kind of look at things like, if you look at the Sphere, or you look at like look at something like talking about a theatrical experience where it's like you're in it. It is all around you.
Very immersive.
You could definitely see that and see 3D and then see VR and go, okay, like how do you wrap this up into something you can do at home? You know, when you're talking about like just a full AR kind of like 3D setup where it surrounds you. You know, you've got like real like holodeck kind of things. Like you could definitely see the future where this becomes a full immersive experience in home that is not constrained by, you know, a TV screen.
The frame of the
the frame. Yeah.
People want it, man. I see so many TikToks where people are like, check out this cool like home theater lighting I got, because they just want to see a little bit more of the extension of a movie.
Exactly. You're extending.
They're like, oh, this scene is purple. My lights are purple. They get they get so excited.
The light is bouncing off the back of the wall from the TV, and it's interacting. You know, it's based on the 2D of the image.
I almost want to comment like, you should try a 3D movie, because like
if you think this is cool,
wait till you see The Last Jedi in 3D. It's way cooler than just like, my wall is also red. Nah, dude. wait.
You're like, it could be both, and it could be coming out at you. You know,
you mentioned things like the Sphere. Like, do you think that there is going to be another evolution of 3D in some way, or do you think the current process and the way we sort of view 3D movies, at least, is that sort of going to always be the I don't know, the staple of that format?
No, I think, you know, cinema is just kind of evolving. I mean, you're just watching it get bigger, get more immersive. You know, first was, you know, IMAX, and
you started with Screen X, and again, that's evolving to Sphere and everything. And then, like, if you could do those holodeck experiences, like, what's it like to, you know, be in a virtual room and stuff, and maybe you're watching a horror movie and Michael Myers pops out next to you, you know, type of deal.
Brother, you are
like,
speaking my language.
Well, you even look at I know that the headset is a very singular experience, but you even have video games now that you can watch via headset that will just map out your whole room, and you'll just be using the camera in the front of the headset, and then it will just kind of plant like ghosts around the house and make it an interactive experience. So
cool.
I think using your space is kind of like a 3D space, and a very interactive space is kind of where
there's also the element of, if we live in different cities and we have headsets with the same apps, we can be in a virtual room together, being talking to each other like right now, but there's the you know, big screen on
if you go on a big screen TV on MetaQuest, you know, they can have rooms where they have like viewing parties, 3D viewing parties, and you just go in there and watch a 3D movie with people.
Very cool. We went to Lightstorm Entertainment at the end of last year? Yeah, towards the end of the last year, to see how James Cameron makes Avatar, which was that whole thing was an incredible experience.
Really impressive.
So cool.
The whole team,
really
like,
impressive.
Really cool stuff, man.
Yeah, and we got to see stuff in 3D, which obviously looked great. But we mentioned that we did stereo conversion, and the thing that he said to us that we're like, oh, that's a pretty great compliment. He said SDFX Studios is the gold standard of 3D conversion, of immersive 3D.
That's awesome.
That's coming from James.
Yes.
3D Cameron.
What do you guys truly think sets you apart from everyone else who is in the 3D conversion game? And like, how do you guys stand out amongst everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is our artists, our artistic intelligence is what we rely on, and the level of care we put into every shot, to the film, and then allowing us kind of, as we said earlier, like push the boundaries and push the limits, and like, all right, what are we doing now? Like, we got this figured out. We have our fundamentals. We can make everything look good, but how can we bring it up to another stage? And how can we bring it up further?
You know, to Jason's point, it's the length of time that we've kind of been doing this, and just the sheer talent that we have in our artistic, you know, team globally. And I think it's just the amount of time we've been doing this, and the films that we've been fortunate enough to work on, and the directors we've been fortunate enough to work with. we know what we're doing and we've done this before. And I think it's just taking all that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, and folding that into each and every project and delivering consistently. You can have all the director involvement and all the creativity in the world to make a really fantastic 3D film, but if you can't deliver it at the end of the day, because we do have deadlines and there are, there's release dates and, things that we have to hit, we have to be able to set the bar, hold the bar, and then deliver consistently and be nimble and be able to pivot and react to changing edits, visual effects that changes, different trailer cuts that come out that move around all the time, because marketing likes to do that. And we have to, for trailers, 4 trailers for one movie, that there was 8 and they had to choose, and we have to be able to pivot and maneuver, and we need to make sure that our quality and everything that we're doing is still adhered to. And like I said, we've been doing this for so long that we're able to do that.
Yeah, and I imagine that's why you guys get a lot of repeat customers on that way. You guys have done so many Marvel movies. You worked on multiple James Cameron films,
Steven
Spielberg,
Star Wars films.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a huge testament. Is like if the filmmakers trust you, then why would they not want to work with you?
I have to ask you guys this question too before we get out of here. If you could bucket list, pull back a classic film that has not been made into a 3D experience that you personally would like to work on, which would it be?
I gotta go first live action Ninja Turtles.
Oh,
sure.
Jason.
Yes. That's right where I'm at. Like I want to go in.
You got to know what a crumpet is
to understand 3D.
Yeah. 3D.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I got to be my number one right there.
You were looking at Mutant Mayhem and you're like, I'm jealous.
100%.
I gotta bring BC90 up to that level.
Yeah.
I would, I'm a huge horror movie fan.
Yes.
I grew up in the 80s. I love A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh my God,
I'm a huge fan. I would love
the first one or Dream Warriors?
Both. So I was talking between. I think the first one, it's a classic. It's great. I think the Dream Warriors, I think you've got a lot more chances there to have some more fun, because you get more dream world kind of stuff where you can have some more fun with the 3D. But I would love to do a horror movie. I would love to do A Nightmare on Elm Street.
That would be really
I'm going to sneak another one in there real
Do
quick.
it.
Go ahead.
The Goonies.
Yes.
Goonies would be great. Like imagine getting into the cave, seeing the ship and everything for the first time.
Honestly, like if you're going, if we're kind of talking about, the 80s, like E.T.
Yeah.
I mean, E.T.
We're also dating ourselves.
We are very much dating ourselves, but I'm just thinking about all these childhood favorites. So I was like, oh, E.T. E.T.'s a big one. Yeah.
What about you guys? I
have
where
2.
would you go?
Mine is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
That would be so
Fifth
sick.
Element.
Really
Yeah.
Dude, oh my gosh. I would love to see, I'll go my favorite film of all time. I'd love to see The Iron Giant. Because I've also dabbled a little bit when I was in the 3D industry of working on like a classic hand-drawn animated film. Cel-shaded. I kind of love that style.
Yeah.
And I loved what Disney did with Lion King and Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. I think are like really cool 3D. I'm talking the classic animated films.
Yeah.
Really cool 3D experiences. Also, they should make Aladdin, throw Aladdin in there, because the magic carpet rides alone and amazing. So I'll go with those, and then maybe also just to finish out the Middle Earth sextilogy, you got to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Hobbits are in 3D, and while we're at it, put the War of the Rohirrim in 3D. That movie was awesome.
It was so good.
That was so good. But to see, I think the classic extended edition, of course,
on
the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think that would also be like that's butts and seats in theaters. That's like that's again opening it up to people that are like, I'm not usually a 3D fan.
Yeah,
and then
I want to go back to Helm's Deep.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Not a 3D fan, but I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, and now I'm curious.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
100%. So there you go, movie executives. So there you go. It's
a big deal. There's some ideas out there.
That's your slate for the next couple of years.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming and for talking about 3D.
Yeah, this was great.
This was really, really fun. Great to catch up, but also, we do our best, and it helps to have subject matter experts here.
Yeah.
So the audience believes us. So thank you guys very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is great. So happy to come and talk and share some knowledge and try to get more people watching 3D.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, check out Mandalorian and Grogu. It'll be in theaters soon. And go out there and buy a 3D projector. I promise you, you'll have a great time. We'll see you next week.
That's why we are watching.